Welcome to Revelation Unraveled. I'm your host, William Tapley, also known as the third eagle of the apocalypse and the co-prophet of the end times. This is part 9 in my series on the Abomination of Desolation, as spoken of by Daniel the prophet. And on this particular program, I want to look at the timeline for the Abomination of Desolation, because this particular Bible prophecy is just about to be fulfilled. And we need to know when this abomination occurs for each of the 4 particular groups, one of which all of us hope to belong to. Now, we need to know when each of these abominations occur if we are to flee. And Jesus says over and over that flight is our only response to the abomination of desolation if we hope to reign with him during the millennium. Now, I've made a small chart which indicates where in Daniel each of these abominations is spoken about, who instigates the abomination, who is affected, and when they occur. In Daniel chapter 8, the affected group are the holy martyrs, and it is the Antichrist who makes them his victims, and they will go to heaven. And this begins at 2300 evenings and mornings before Armageddon. Now, the reason Daniel uses 2300 evenings and mornings rather than 1150 days is because 23 is another number for the Antichrist. And of course, as I have said many times, 23 is a way to express 2 before 3, or man before God, or 2 over 3, which is a fraction, yielding the decimal 0.666. Now, I'm going to read the pertinent passages as far as the holy martyrs go from Daniel chapter number 8, and these are verses 13 and 14, and I'm reading from the Catholic Douay-Rheims translation. How long shall be the vision concerning the continual sacrifice, and the sin of desolation that is made, and the sanctuary and the strength be trodden under foot? And he said to him, unto evening and morning, 2,300 days, and the sanctuary shall be cleansed. In Daniel chapter number 9, the affected group are the converted Jews, and the abomination is brought upon the nation of Israel by the prince of Persia. And this remnant of Israel must flee to the mountains, as Jesus warns in the Olivet Discourse. And this occurs, according to Daniel, in the midst of the week. In other words, during the middle of the 7 years of tribulation. Now, the pertinent passage for the converted Jews can be found in Daniel chapter number 9, verse 27. And he shall confirm the covenant with many in 1 week. Now, the many does not refer to the entire nation of Israel, but rather to the remnant of Israel. And the covenant which is confirmed is not any new covenant or new peace treaty, as is so often misunderstood, but rather Jesus himself is going to confirm the new covenant with this remnant of Israel. And in the half of the week, the victim and the sacrifice shall fail. This is the midst or middle of the 7 years of tribulation. And there shall be in the temple the abomination of desolation, and the desolation shall continue even to the consummation and to the end. In Daniel chapter number 11, the affected group are the raptured Protestants. And their warning has already occurred, because the abomination of desolation which Daniel writes about was instigated by Antiochus Epiphanes, and it affected the temple in Jerusalem. Now, of course, the raptured Protestants will go to heaven, just like the holy martyrs in Daniel chapter number 8. These are the 2 groups which Jesus will gather from one end of heaven to the other end of heaven for the Battle of Armageddon. And as I said, this warning has already occurred, and that means that Protestants must be ready at all times for the imminent rapture. In Daniel chapter 11, verse 31, we find the abomination of desolation, which is a warning to the raptured Protestants. And arms shall stand on his part, and they shall defile the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the continual sacrifice, and they shall place there the abomination unto desolation. Now, this refers to Antiochus Epiphanes. It was a prophecy by Daniel that he would desecrate the temple in Jerusalem. And of course, that is a prefiguring of what the Antichrist will do in these end times. The last description of Daniel's abomination of desolation occurs in chapter 12, which, as we have learned, is actually an extension of chapter number 10. The affected group are the protected Catholics. The abomination of desolation will be brought upon them by the false prophet, and they must flee into the desert. Catholics are left behind. They will not be raptured for the most part. And this occurs 1,290 days before the beginning of Armageddon and 1,335 days before the consummation of Armageddon. Now, the abomination of desolation for the protected Catholics can be found in Daniel chapter 12, verses 11 and 12. And from the time when the continual sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination unto desolation shall be set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he that waits and comes unto 1,335 days. And of course, if you come to the end of Armageddon, if you survive until then, that is why you will be blessed. Now, Daniel explains what this continual sacrifice refers to in Daniel chapter number 10, verse number 3. Let's take a look. Now, I've already explained several times how Daniel sealed up his vision through a hidden structure. And in the case of chapters 10 and 12, the verses in chapter 12 must be reversed and placed next to the verses in chapter number 10. And that way, verse number 3 in chapter 10 explains verse number 11 in chapter 12. And from the time when the continual sacrifice shall be taken away is explained by the phrase, I ate no desirable bread, and neither flesh nor wine entered into my mouth. Obviously, this is referring to the Holy Eucharist. And that is the continual sacrifice, which the false prophet will take away from the Catholic Church. So, it's fairly easy to see that Daniel is writing about 4 different abominations of desolation. They affect 4 different groups, and they are instigated by 4 different individuals. Now the question is, when do each of these abominations occur? And I've made a small chart which explains the timeline, which occurs first, which occurs last. And it's important for you to know when your particular group is affected, because when they occur, you must flee. Now, on the abomination of desolation timeline, the conclusion is Armageddon in the year 2017, between October 13th and November 29th, as I have explained on previous programs. And this number of days, 45, is between those 2 dates. And of course, for the raptured Protestants, your abomination of desolation already occurred when Antiochus Epiphanes desecrated the temple in Jerusalem. In other words, you must be ready at all times. Now, for protected Catholics, Daniel gives 2 dates. One is 1,290 days before the beginning of Armageddon and 1,335 days before the end of Armageddon. And this will be either April 2nd, 3rd, or 4th, somewhere in that time frame. Now, I should add a disclaimer here that these dates for the abomination of desolation for the 4 different groups are approximate. This is a case where, as Jesus said, you cannot know the exact day or the hour. For example, I believe it's very possible that the false prophet will take away the continual sacrifice during Holy Week of 2014. In other words, between April 13th and April 20th. And it's interesting that next year, those dates are the same for both Christians and the Orthodox. Now, that would be approximately a week to 10 days after Daniel says the Abomination of Desolation is set up in the Catholic Church. Now for the converted Jews, Daniel says the Abomination of Desolation for them will occur in the midst of the week. In other words, at the midpoint of the 7 years of tribulation, approximately 1,260 days before the conclusion of Armageddon. In other words, around June 6th of next year. That's when the Prince of Persia will cause the Abomination of Desolation in the nation of Israel. And several months after that, the Antichrist will start his reign of terror against the martyrs, and there will be many people killed by the Antichrist. And this occurs 2,300 evenings and mornings before Armageddon. In other words, approximately 1,150 days. So, in summary, if my calculations for the date for Armageddon is correct, then the midpoint of the tribulation occurs next April. These dates, however, should not be considered as written in stone. But Daniel did give us these days for a reason. Now, Jesus said that the days will be shortened. He promised. Does that mean that the Great Tribulation will begin sooner than prophesied or later than prophesied? And please don't forget, the rapture can occur at any time. And along with the rapture comes nuclear warfare. Please notice that for these 4 groups, Daniel gave the days for 3 of them, but for the rapture he did not. And of course, that's because he knew he was speaking about an event that occurred many thousands of years ago. In other words, the warning for those who will be raptured has already come and gone. You must be ready at all times. And now I would like to bring to your attention once again my latest promotion, and that is my bumper sticker, which promotes my ministry on YouTube. And if you would like one of these free of charge, simply send me a self-addressed stamped envelope. Please write to the address you see on your screen.